Okay, we'll come to order. Today is the regular meeting of the Glendale Planning Commission. It's August 19th, 2009. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Burnham, Commissioner Lee,
Here.
Commissioner Sheets,
Here.
Commissioner Torgerson,
Here.
Chairperson Kane.
Here. Report regarding posting of agenda, please.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on Wednesday, August 12, 2009 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Great, thank you. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, approval of minutes from the June 17th special meeting. Special in that I believe it started at 4 o'clock instead of 5. Any comments or corrections?
I move that we approve them. Second.
A motion support call roll, please.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Sheets,
Aye.
Commissioner Torgerson,
Aye.
Chairperson Kane.
Aye, and a vote of 4-0. The minutes of June 17th have been approved. Oral communications, I have no cards, which is understandable since we have no audience. Zoning appeals, old business, conditional use permit, PCUP 2008-047. This was continued from June 17th, 2009. The location is 1841 Tamerlane Drive, and I understand there's a request to continue.
Yes, staff requests that this conditional use permit be continued until the meeting of September 16th of 2009.
And the reasons for that?
A couple of reasons. We're still studying ways to best address a nearby neighbor's serious illness.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing actually was it didn't occur to me at the previous meeting, but there was one person in opposition at that meeting. Unfortunately, they were not the official appellants, and the appellants actually are on vacation now, so they weren't.
So the actual parties are on vacation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it just, during the meeting, they said, we're fine with this date. Unfortunately, they were not the official appellants.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd be interested in knowing what you have uncovered, but since we're going to move to continue, it's probably not right to quote-unquote, take testimony. So that said, can I have a motion to continue, please, to a date certain of September 16th without further notice, right?
Correct, because
Okay.
we're continuing to a date certain.
Motion, please.
Also move that we continue to a date certain without further posting.
That date would be.
September 16th, 2009.
Support, please.
So moved.
Call roll.
Second.
A motion and support. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Sheets,
Aye.
Commissioner Torgerson,
Aye.
Chairperson Kane.
Aye, a vote of 4-0. CUP case 2008-047 has been continued to September 16th without further notice. Next agenda item is tentative parcel map number GLN 1626. This also is continued from June 17th, 2009. It's 1770 Golf Club Drive, and again, I understand there's a continuance request.
Yes, staff again would like to request a continuance for this parcel map to, again, the meeting of, September 16, 2009. Environmental review is needed for this, and before you all can act on it, there is a 20-day comment period, and that is expected to start next week and will end by the 16th.
Did we continue it originally for that purpose, to have the negative declaration? What was the reason we continued it the last time?
There were some issues of the proposed parcel map that were not in compliance with our code.
And then by the time they did that and by the time he did negative deck, we ran out of time.
Right.
Okay. Motion to continue, gentlemen?
I move that we continue this item until September 16th.
Support, please.
Second.
Motion support, roll, please.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Sheets,
Aye.
Commissioner Torgerson,
Aye.
Chairperson Kane.
Aye, and a vote of 4-0. A motion to continue without further notification.
Second.
Correct.
Backed up. Yeah, unfortunately, we need to do it all again. I'm sorry. So we'll withdraw the motion. We need a new motion.
Okay, I move to continue this item till the September 16th, 2009 Planning Commission meeting
Without further notice.
without further notice.
Second.
Motion support call, roll call, please.
Commissioner Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Sheets.
Aye.
Commissioner Torgerson.
Aye.
Chairperson Kate.
Aye, all right. On a vote of 4-0, the tentative parcel map GLN 1626 is continued to June 17th, to September 16th, without further notice.
Thank you.
Thank you, okay. Under new business, we have a zoning code amendment case, number PZON 2009-003. It's within the city of Glendale, and these are amendments to Title 30 of the Glendale Municipal Code 1995, relating generally to modifications of approved landscape plans when revisions are consistent with California-friendly plantings. Staff is represented by Kristen Asp, and it is a motion that the Planning Commission recommend to City Council that they adopt the proposed amendments to Title 30 of the Glendale Municipal Code relating to the modifications to the approved landscape plans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Just a little bit of background. Back on June 30th, Council adopted revisions to Title 13 of the Glendale Municipal Code that relates to water conservation, and part of that ordinance included a no water waste provision, as well as mandatory conservation phases. There are several conservation phases of that ordinance, and each one has an increasing water restriction. At that meeting, Council also initiated a code amendment giving staff direction to amend language to the zoning code to allow modifications to approved landscape plans when the revisions are consistent with California-friendly plantings. This amendment provides flexibility to property owners with approved landscape plans, helping them balance the landscape requirements as well as water conservation during mandatory conservation phases by allowing staff to review and approve modifications when they are, again, consistent with California-friendly plantings. Now, on August 11th, just last week, Council adopted Phase 2 of the Water Conservation Ordinance. And what most people are probably familiar with as part of Phase 2 is that landscape watering is restricted to Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays for no more than 10 minutes per watering station per day. But also as part of Phase 2, that our restrictions relate to landscape projects. No new landscape projects or retrofit landscape projects. They must be deferred. They're not allowed during this phase, with the exception of California-friendly landscapes. And California-friendly landscapes are those plantings that require low water use for maintenance and that are included in the Metropolitan Water District's California-friendly Garden Guide Catalog, which can be found at bewaterwise.com. And I've just pulled up a sample from the bewaterwise.com website to kind of illustrate all the stuff that they offer. They have a wide variety in their catalog, and you can search by common name or botanical plant name, and you can go by alphabet. To just briefly go over the current regulations of the zoning code, the code currently allows a review authority, like the Design Review Board, like the Planning Commission or City Council, to make modifications to previously approved projects at the request of an applicant. And it also allows the review authority to delegate to the Director of Planning or the Director of Development Services to approve minor modifications, but as long as those changes are in substantial conformance with the approved plans that the review authority already saw. This provision is often used for more recent projects, but the zoning code also has an additional provision for maintenance of approved landscape plans for completed projects. There is a 5-year minimum for single-family projects and a permanent requirement for all other projects. And in the case of completed projects, the Director of Planning already has the authority given in the zoning code to approve changes specifically to landscape plans. The proposed regulations and the proposed amendments sort of bridge that gap to address the need to balance the approved landscape plans with, again, the restrictions of Phase 2 of the Water Conservation Ordinance by giving either Director of Planning or the Director of Development Services the ability to approve modifications on previously approved landscape plans when they are consistent with California-friendly plantings, And sort of a consequence of this is, as long as Phase 2 or subsequent phases, if they increase, Phase 3, Phase 4 of the water conservation are in effect, all new landscaping or changes to existing landscaping must be deferred again unless they comply with California-friendly plantings. And this amendment would just give projects the flexibility to make modifications consistent with California-friendly plantings without having to return to the original review authority, the Design Review Board, the Planning Commission, or City Council, which often requires another hearing with public notice. While in Phase 2 of water conservation, of this conservation ordinance, staff is working with current applicants to modify either previously approved landscape plans as well as any proposed landscape plans to comply with the plant palette that's given on the bewaterwise.com website before they go to Design Review Board, for example. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission review the amendments and make a recommendation to City Council for adoption. If there's any questions, I'm available.
Questions from the commission? I have a couple. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have none.
I have a couple that are more probably related to the ordinance, and I'm not sure that you could actually address them, but I'm curious. Re-landscaping a yard at an existing house isn't a permit activity typically, is it?
Correct.
So how can they stop a project that doesn't require permitting?
I'll turn you in.
Okay. And once you
it's-
turn me in to someone, what's the penalty for?
What's the offense?
Right. What's, yeah.
I'm not sure from the enforcement side, from the water conservation ordinance, what the penalty will be, but it would be, as Commissioner Torgerson said, neighbors reporting something, as well as the alternative to that is getting the word out there that any retrofit of existing landscaping must comply with California-friendly plantings. So that's the bigger challenge of the public outreach.
Okay. So you'd be green listed instead of blacklisted?
No hanging.
We're working with stuff at the counter. We're letting everybody know who comes to see our counter that, hey, please be aware of this. If you have a project and you're maybe going through the Design Review Board, you have to comply with California-friendly plantings. But just in general, it's posted to get the word out there.
Just from a kind of a general purpose urban planning point of view, what has the city done to put the word out about this new ordinance? Because I'm aware of it because I kind of keep track of things like this, but the only thing I remember seeing in the mail was the Department of Water and Power's little. And if you
Correct.
bother
I
to
think that
open
that
it
was a
up and
portion
read
of
it,
their
you'd see
public
it,
outreach.
but how many people read that? It just goes in the junk mail pile, I imagine. Have there been TV ads? Is there any plan for just kind of general purpose postcard mailings to all the residents of the city to let them know that they've got a new water schedule?
I'm not
I think what they
100%
do-
certain from
I think that what they do is
Water
they
Power's
pick a neighbor
perspective.
or a yard, and then they enforce it, and then the neighbor contacts the radio stations, and then the radio stations make a big deal out of it, and people find out about it
Ken
that
and
way.
Bob out there.
Or whoever they are. yes.
I do know that it's been in the local newspaper quite often with specific time frames and dates, so if people do get the news press and read it, is there. But other than that, I don't know that we got anything.
Well, you indicated
Specific.
the mailing, and I know that on the GWP website, there's a whole link to the bewaterwise.com and the need for conservation.
What about, since there's a moratorium, what about yards that look really bad that would be written up by neighborhood services for appearance? Now they're not allowed to do anything?
There's a separate provision that the Commission looked at back in February of previous amendments to the landscape ordinance that said when, under a mandatory phase of water conservation, it should not be a violation of the zoning code when those water restrictions are in place.
Meaning that they're not in trouble until the restrictions are lifted. Wow, that's great. Good, can get away with some stuff there.
So you can have a brown yard.
And one more point, I know they've limited the watering that they've limited the watering as far as automatic irrigation systems. Are you still allowed, I believe you're still allowed to water with hose, and is there any verbiage about a control on the hose?
I believe there is verbiage on
I mean, I know that's what LA put in place, but
So
unfortunately,
there is verbiage.
for some reason, I'm more familiar with LA's requirement than I am with Glendale's for some reason.
I know there's verbiage on using a hose to wash a car. You can do that, but you have to have a
automatic.
shut-off. And I think that, I remember reading that, or hearing from somebody, I forget, that you can water, but you're supposed to water during those hours, and it's like another station. You have a 10-minute time frame to water your flower beds or your plants or whatever. That's what I think I remember hearing, but I don't remember reading it on any official document.
I was just curious about it. You know,
That's a good question, 'cause
Could
a lot of
very well
people
be in
are-
violation and just didn't know.
I think a lot of people aren't going to know, and they're going to have their sprinklers going all week.
Well, I mean, there's four of us that, you know, are generally in tune with what, in theory, is going on with the city, and even we are not that up to speed. Part of it could just because it's summer and people pay less attention to things, but all right, those are my questions. Were there any others?
I guess I would just add, and it goes along the lines of your questioning, I think enforcement is going to be extremely difficult in this process. And I also think that it's going to be a contentious issue among neighbors in certain neighborhoods. And I guess we should prepare for that, because if it's if difficult to enforce, it makes it confusing as far as what to do and when to do it, and we have few staff available to go out on issues anyway. I don't know what we're going to do about that. If it's going to come back, we're going to have to address the issue, but I do have a concern about enforcement and what we can do about that and to keep up with the issue.
Sure.
Because it's going to be an education process in addition to going out and observing a violation.
And I'd be happy to pass along your comments to GWP staff to make them aware.
Okay. Absent further conversation, discussion, or questions, could we have a motion of recommendation, please?
Going to the next item.
What?
The,
We have to recommend.
Oh,
We have to
excuse
recommend
me.
the city council.
That recommendation.
I can recommend that.
I'm moving.
I'm sorry, Mr. Torgerson appears anxious and ready to go.
Do it.
Something I can read, I don't have to think. I would move that upon consideration of the proposed ordinance relating to modifications of approved landscape plans when revisions are consistent with California-friendly plantings, the Planning Commission would recommend that the City Council adopt the proposed amendments to Title 30 of the Glendale Municipal Code in 1995.
I second that.
Motion support, call roll, please.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Sheets,
Aye.
Commissioner Torgerson,
Aye.
Chairperson Kate.
Aye. On a vote of 4-0, which is unanimous for those present, the Planning Commission recommends that City Council adopt the zoning code amendments outlined in PZON 2009-003. Moving on to Planning Department updates.
There should have been information on your packets. That would be an update of decision letters in case it's read by the zoning administrator. And then also we have a short update on the Glendale Community Plan Advisory Committee. Started its meetings earlier this month on August 1st, had the last one on Monday. And what we're doing is we're meeting with, and now our group is about 35 members of the community out there, and also members of our boards and commissions. Mr. Sheets and Mr. Lee are members, representative members from the planning.
And thank you for doing that, gentlemen. We certainly appreciate it.
We also have DRB members, we have members from Civilian Fire Board, Historic Preservation, and Historic Preservation. So we are well represented on that board. We also have a variety of people representing community groups, residential groups, business organizations. So it is a really well-rounded group. And what we're working on right now is looking at those issues that were identified during community meetings last spring as being areas where there wasn't agreement. And so we started with an introduction. Our last meeting, we talked about kind of the general overall land use. What do they see for the commercial land uses out there? And basically what we got out of it is that it doesn't seem like people want a lot of change. They really want to upgrade what's there, which is important because sometimes we do hear, like in downtown, they want to see some significant change. So this is actually, it just confirms with the board, with the commission, also what we heard from the community. So we're going to be reporting back to the advisory committee on the 31st with what we look at as the overall land use pattern that was recommended to us. Specifically on Foothill, they recognized it as a corridor, a commercial corridor. And we're going to be coming back with some proposed zoning standards that we think address a lot of the issues that were raised by the advisory committee members through some photos they submitted, as well as testimony that we received from residents in the earlier meetings last spring. At the same time, we're working on the community plan. I passed this out. This is an overall view of how our community plans are going to fit into our overall general plan. As you know, a year or so ago, we requested money to do a comprehensive update of our general plan. And just the budget being the way it is, we were not able to proceed with a citywide comprehensive general plan update. And so that is the reason why we decided to proceed with community plans. And North Glendale is the first community plan. What we're doing now is basically having two processes run in tandem. One of them is a community plan process. It's well underway with the advisory committee. The second process is what we're doing in-house, and that's essentially a reorganization of our general plan, where we're taking some of the long-range plan topics that were done in 2006. I know many of you were involved with the long-range plan. Out of that, the community identified roughly 12 major issues that were important to the community. We're taking those issues and comparing them to our existing general plan elements and all the goals and policies we have in the elements, seeing where we have overlap. We're identifying that, making that basically general plan citywide goals and values. From that framework, that's how we're going to organize our community plan. So we'll have consistency, like the picture would show. We have consistency overall, so eventually all the community plans will be implementing the same goals and values, perhaps maybe a slightly different way, tailored to the community, but overall we'll have a clear citywide goals and values statement identified. We will also have the existing elements reorganized to where the community plans will contain basic goals and values. It will be a background report to the general plan that will contain the majority of the information that's currently in our elements now. So all your background reports, all your mapping, some of the big picture citywide stuff would be in the background report. Our goal is that the community plan actually be the document that says this is really what we want in the community. Here's how the goals and policies citywide will apply in this community. And we'll also have design standards built into the community plan. So we're really shifting our general plan focus to community plans and away from the citywide documents that we have right now.
So right now we have, what, 7 or
We have
8?
7 mandatory
Yeah, 7.
elements and several additional ones.
So we have a total like 11, I think.
Right. And
So now we're going to go from those 11 documents into a citywide general plan with individual community plans that encompass the information in those other elements, or?
Right, the community, sorry, I've just been told this microphone's not working, but the community plans will be the main focus for when somebody comes in and want to know how land use, how should they develop their land, or what is acceptable, what does the community want to see on certain parcels and in the community. It'll be the community plan that'll have that information defined, and that's where you'll go to see what is citywide policy for commercial, how is that applied in this community? And someone will be able to pick up the North Glendale Community Plan and see exactly what the community would like to see and what the long-term goals are. Because right now, if somebody comes in and asks, what's the long-term goals for North Glendale, we give them the citywide general plan. There's nothing that defines what people want to see in North Glendale or any other community to that degree of detail. And we've heard a lot of discussion in DRB, it's ongoing, about what is neighborhood compatibility and what should we be looking at in terms of neighborhood compatibility. And everybody says, well, it really varies based on your neighborhood, yet that is not defined anywhere. And so we've We recognize that this is a weakness in our policy documents. We have a good citywide policy document, and then we have zoning that's very specific and DRB that looks at individual lots as they come through. But it's that mid-level policy document that really isn't there. It's what does the community want to see? What does each individual neighborhood want to see? And that's what we're really trying to define in a community plan. And so we're hoping that if we can combine policy, we can combine zoning standards if we need to tweak them to reflect what a community wants to see. We'd like to have that addressed. And then especially design guidelines. So we'll have a better policy documents for everybody, not only developers, but also residents, anybody else who's interested in seeing the direction of how the community should go forward.
So to clarify, if we are hearing a variance case, for instance, and one of the findings you have to make for a variance is that it would be compatible with the general plan. Okay, now the general plan consists of 9 mandatory elements and several optional elements that we have. So this would add community plans and a citywide plans and values and goals document to those 7 state mandated mandatory ones, or would
Eventually, we would like to replace the mandatory ones. As soon as we get all of community plans done, they'll replace those.
by
So eventually, the community plans will be the main document that we'll focus on for the general plan, for
Okay, so
looking at
if I'm-
land use, for looking at, for instance, for neighborhood compatibility, for circulation. Basically, the information that we have in our general plan now that is citywide, we're taking that information as it applies to those communities and folding it into the community plans. So
So
we're not
eventually-
able to replace it all at once because we're not able to do all the
Right.
community plans at once, but our eventual goal is to set it up like this, so where eventually we'll have a community plan for every place in the city.
Great. So I'm from the state, and I come in, say, "Hi, I'm from the government. I'm here to help."
Sorry.
Show me your. I had to do that. Show me your traffic element. You'll point to individual community plans that each one of which has a traffic element for that particular area of the city.
Right, we will have a general plan background report that'll have the citywide traffic where it is right now, but then you can go to the individual community plan and see how does that relate to the individual community. So our goal is that you don't have to look at the background report, you should be able to pick up the community plan and know how you should develop. We want that to be the key document that when people come in, they say, well, what does the community want to see? We can show them that, they can look at the zoning, they could see the design that people would like to see, and they could see the major street cross-sections, things like that, that they're going to need to know when they develop.
Thank you.
So this report, I guess I'm understanding, is that it'll be more specific, more localized and tailored to each community.
Yes.
So, but it'll follow this general plan values. Now, when you compare one community to the other community, then it is, I guess, we can assume that some of those, the plans will be different, so that we'll be working with a different set of values and guidelines from
Well,
one community to the other community?
We might see implementation that might be slightly different, but our goal in identifying citywide general plan values and goals is that they would be applicable to all areas of the city. It's what does that mean to each individual community? That's what we would want to have defined within the community plans. For instance, you might have commercial activities that would be citywide, but any kind of standards that would relate to perhaps commercial on sloping properties, you would have specific information dealing with those sorts of situations in the North Glendale plan because you do have that situation. Whereas right now, if you look at our general plan, we don't address any type of sloping property on commercial at all. Our zoning code doesn't address that at all because it's very unique to the North Glendale. Yet, you wouldn't see that in a plan that covers South Glendale, just because the situation's a little different. You might see it in a plan that has Adams Hill. You might see a lot of information related to hillside development. You would see it in any type of a specific plan that would talk about, or a community plan that would talk about Glen Oaks Canyon or Chevy Chase Canyon. You definitely were going to have concerns with hillside development. So it just depends where you're at, how you would tailor what the community wants to see. And what we're hearing is each individual community is different, the concerns are different. They've heard that for years in Design Review Board. So
Might as well.
that's what we're moving toward, but we just want to give you an update because we are working on these. These are large efforts. The community plan's a large effort, as is reorganizing our general plan into different topics. Again, it's kind of morphing as we write it. You try to organize it, and then every time we have people review it, it changes slightly, and so it's an ongoing process. We just wanted to let you know this is going on at the same time, so when we do bring something before you, it doesn't hit you as a surprise.
I would add to that in relation to the questions that have been asked, it's not so much in what I'm seeing. I went to the first two meetings when we gathered the information. I missed the presentation of the combining that information, but I've been to the two advisory commission meetings, or committee meetings, and it's not so much, there's no discussion about the values and goals specifically. It's more discussion about elements relative to where you are, which comes clear when you're talking with a group of people that are from the specific area, that know the geography, that know the history. In the past, at least I've seen in discussions at council regarding downtown Montrose, and in the more recent past regarding the old lumber yard up on Foothill that had all the controversy, and there was a lot of detailed research and a lot of questioning, and in the end it was, well, what is compatible up there? It came down to that, and I'm finding in these meetings that those are the things that are being discussed because the people from that geography not so much want to talk about it. Those are the items to talk about, and they're adding clarity and specificity to what's happening in my community relative to the goals and values. So it's hearkening back to a time that I remember a number of years back in the city. They had a neighborhood task force, and I was involved in a committee there, and what was really unique about that, and what I think is wonderful about this process, it involved the community. And it starts out as a, for lack of a better term, a professional process. It's a planning process, a city government process, but as you involve the community, the professionals do their job, and they're doing it very well, and it's a very in-depth process, and I compliment the planning commission, the planning department. But it becomes a personal issue also, not by choice, but just by the evolution of the process. And I think that's great, because as you go through this, you develop a connection to the results. You see what's happening, you understand how they evolve, and I think the city will become more connected to what the community wants up there. And as we go forward and do the other parts of the community, I hope the same thing's going to happen. I see it happening in the quote-unquote North Glendale area. I see people coming in with high energy, people that care, people that want to be involved, and people that are willing to give their 2 cents about what's going on and what needs to be done up there. And it's one thing to sit back and assume that, or to do some studies and present that. And I think it's another thing, and I think it's a better way to go, to have the people get involved that live there, that know the problems and issues, and understand, at least at that level, where they want to go. So it's a great process. I think it's going in a good direction, and I think sometime, this is the binder that they've handed out, and it takes us, at least currently scheduled, somewhere up into November, with a lot of meetings that evolve and talk about the important issues. So I think it's a great process, and I think we're going in the right direction, and I think it's going to add a lot of clarity throughout the city as we evolve through this framework that you're talking about. Thank you.
I just have 3 questions related to the planning department update. First, on the North Glendale plan, I presume the planning commissioners are the most impressive commissioners there.
Of course.
Thank you.
Good answer.
They clean up well.
Secondly, and this is, every project's unique, but it sure seems like month after month, we're seeing approved with conditions, approved with conditions, approved with conditions, and again, projects are specific, but it sure doesn't seem like we see much in the way of denials and rejected variances and conditional use permits. And it's just an observation in terms of tone that, again, projects are unique, there may be perfectly good reasons for it, but I just throw it out there that I really wonder how tough the planning department is. Just an editorial comment. When you see nothing but approvals, even approvals with conditions, you really wonder what's getting slid through that the community will eventually be upset about. And then, are we having a meeting in the first part of September, or is the 19th the first one? Was it the 19th? I can't remember what date we were continuing.
We have a meeting
Thank you.
on September 2nd,
Uh-huh.
and right now we have the appeal at Cascadia that was continued to that date.
Mhm.
So we are showing that item on the agenda. On the 16th, we have
These
the
two
Tamerlane
continuances.
project is back. We
Mhm.
have 601 South Brand, which is a use variance. We have 1770 Golf Club Drive, the parcel map, that'll also be on that evening. We also have cases scheduled, we have complete agendas also for October.
But, so September, we have the two continuances in one item. Is that correct?
Yes,
For the second meeting?
for the second meeting and the first meeting, we have the appeal at Cascadia.
Okay. Well, clearly for the first meeting, but even with the second, it seems like 5 o'clock's an appropriate start time. Okay. Just keeping an eye on the time and our ability to focus. Okay. Any other comments or questions from commissioners?
I just wanted to find out what the status is on this,
Oh,
that La Crescena and Montrose, that apartment, a little
With the
retaining
barrier wall?
project. I don't know if you want to call it a little,
Oh, the
I guess,
sign.
protective wall.
that barrier wall kitty
Barrier
corner
wall.
to the 7-Eleven, where they were granted a variance to put in a nice little wall.
It's been a while.
I don't know.
It's still up there.
They built it without permit, and then
And we put some conditions on there, too.
We allow,
roof in there.
we allowed them to keep a wall, but they needed to totally change it. They needed to do some
rebuild it.
specific things. And that's, I bet, approaching 6 months without any action.
Yeah, I don't know that one. I'd have to check the status.
Oh, we'll hear about it come September 2nd, I guess.
Okay.
Arrests, convictions, things like that.
Landscaping.
Yeah, landscaping.
No water.
Yeah, let's hope they don't put artificial turf in front of it right now.
California-friendly plants.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else from staff? Anything else from commissioners?
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned.